Welcome to episode 39. I'm Luke.
And I am George.
Today we welcome Adam B Levine of 33AI, a true original gangster of Bitcoin education, having founded Speaking of Bitcoin, formerly Let's Talk Bitcoin, along with a number of other projects. We also welcome Freya Stevens of Likvidi, who are connecting the world of carbon credits to the NFT space. This is a really fascinating conversation around carbon credits, how they work, how they can add value to NFTs and vice versa. We discuss AI, its impact on art, and how it can be used for collaboration, and much, much more. At the end, we announce the winner of REKT Gerbil and read out some entries. Stay tuned to Twitter for the next competition, and we hope you enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the Non-Fund Gerbils podcast, the show about digitally scarce gerbils, non-fungible assets, and the growing decentralized economy. Welcome to the podcast, Adam B Levine and Freya. Adam, you're from 330.ai Innovations, and Freya, you're from Likvidi. And it's very cool to have you both on the podcast. Adam, I listened to you way back in the early days. You were a huge force in my learning of Bitcoin, along with Andreas. So a quick thank you for that. And it's wonderful to come full circle and have you on our podcast after many of these years. But it sounds like we've got loads of really interesting things to dive into here. I think the first thing to do would just be to set the scene. And for those that weren't super OG and had the pleasure of your podcast back in the early days, give us a rundown, Adam, of what you've been up to these last few years.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that very kind intro, George. So I got my start in cryptocurrency back in 2011. In 2013, I launched my fifth Bitcoin podcast, but the first or second one under my real name. And it was kind of right place, right time. And there was this period of about 18 months where, myself, Andreas Antonopoulos, Stephanie Murphy, we're really the only kind of meaningful platform that were out there where you could talk about these ideas. And so as a result, a lot of kind of the early discussion, especially around non-currency uses of tokens, right? So basically using tokens for everything other than money, which was my personal obsession. A lot of those discussions, a lot of the early experiments, a lot of the first implementations, I either did directly myself as part of a podcast network, first rewards program, first token control access, areas, first token control access forums. We even tokenized roles. So there were like editor coins and writer coins and podcaster coins that had economic value where, anyways, we did all kinds of experiments. As a result of that, I actually wound up building an infrastructure company called Tokenly from 2014 on. And that's in the process of transitioning now over to kind of its next phase of its life. But recently, I've been working in kind of the area of connecting artificial intelligence and some of the most interesting technologies that are out there in ways that enhance human creativity. And something that I've become very passionate about, first as a hobbyist about 3 years ago. And then we went professional on it and started actually building product last summer. And so that's kind of what I've been up to. When I look at the space today, I see cryptocurrency is a place where a lot of the use cases that we were really excited about are being validated. And it's also a place that's commodifying, right? It's a place where there's a lot of competition increasingly in any of these verticals that look like they're going to do something meaningful. And that's kind of the signal for me that it's my time to leave and find the next technology that I think is going to be really, really disruptive and important. And so that's, again, what I've been doing. So what I see in AI today is basically what I saw back in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency broadly in 2012, 2013, which is an incredibly disruptive space that nobody understands, where the technology is moving so fast in the open source that the opportunities are enormous to connect the dots between, what's possible now with technology and what used to be impossible and what most people still think is impossible. So I'm really excited to be here today. I appreciate the time, and I'm really excited about this project too that we're working on with Freya.
Yeah, Freya, give us a rundown on your background and how you came to work alongside Adam.
Oh, sure. Like you, I started out in crypto through the Let's Talk Bitcoin podcast. Literally taught me everything I knew about Bitcoin to get started. So I also tip my hat to Adam, we did a little bit of work together last year on a previous iteration of this project while it was really kind of getting off the ground. And I then was approached by somebody that I worked with in the past on a very successful project in 2017 in the ICO boom, I suppose, is that what you'd characterize that year by? And he said to me, "Oh, I'm really excited by this new market that's emerging around tokenized carbon credits." And I'd not really heard of carbon credits before, and I sort of did some research and saw what he saw, and he's absolutely right. It's really is kind of a growing market. Climate change is something that's really urgently in need of addressing right now, and tokenizing carbon credits is a very big growth opportunity. So we're here with a new company called Likvidi, and we have an aim to help tackle climate change through tokenized carbon credits. I may need to qualify some of this. People may be beginners on the topic of carbon credits, so I can just briefly explain if that's helpful.
Yeah, that would be great, actually. Yeah.
Sure, no worries. So yeah, as you know, like global warming is a big problem for the environment right now. So most people will probably have seen a number of news stories about climate change and the effects that's having on the world's weather, for example, more extreme weather events, forest fires, rising sea levels, that kind of thing. Well, one of the biggest drivers of climate change is carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, specifically burning of fossil fuels, which is the biggest contributor to carbon emissions, but also industrial output in general, and of course, each of us as we go about our lives using transport, heating, etc. So in order to avoid the adverse effects of climate change, we do need to tackle the amount of carbon that we're emitting. And how we do that is by becoming less resource intensive to try and reduce our emissions. And then where we can't reduce emissions, for example, heating in the winter in many countries is essential. And that's where Likvidi comes in. So we have a focus on helping people to offset their carbon emissions, meaning that whatever CO2 you're responsible for generating, you can now buy the equivalent amount of CO2 capture, which is, and that process is called offsetting your carbon. So previously only available to large companies because you could only buy carbon credits in bulk. Now with blockchain, it's possible to offer smaller amounts of carbon credits to everybody to account for their personal emissions. And that's a new thing. So anyone wanting to tackle climate change on a personal level can now do that. And that's really our goal with Likvidi. So that's like a potted explanation. I hope that's made things clearer.
No, that's great. Coming in as a complete newbie in the carbon credits space, say I spend £100 on carbon credits, what then happens to that £100? How does that then go back into the system to help offset?
Yeah, so carbon credits, again, you can look at projects around the world, right? And sometimes it's somebody wants to build a solar plant in order to replace the need for burning, something that's less clean than that would be. Sometimes people have, forests where simply by not cutting them, they wind up being better than the alternative of cutting them. Right. And so that's really what kind of carbon credits, that's where the proceeds are going to. Not all of the proceeds in a project like this, but the vast majority of the proceeds, my understanding, Freya, is that is correct. And basically what happens is that you're looking at different markets around the world. So a carbon credit in South America might cost a different amount than a carbon credit coming out of the Congo, might cost a different amount than coming out of, the forests of Germany. And so it's a really interesting market where what you're doing effectively, in my opinion, is you are supporting financially projects which are good. And typically the reason why companies buy these carbon credits, why companies do, is to offset their own emissions, right? So you've got a chemical plant and your chemical plant puts out a certain amount of harmful, material into the environment. And so then you support projects that do the opposite of that as a way to offset the damage that you are doing there. Right. So I that's kind of my understanding of how carbon credits work in this context. And in the individual side, I kind of think about it like it's a Rolex, right? as a person, like you don't have the same type of load on the environment as like a big, chemical manufacturing company. So there's a difference in kind of the why you would want to do it. But if it's something that's important to you, then this gives you a way to actually try to contribute back and to try and make a difference for the positive. So again, like these aren't products that anybody has to buy. These are products that people, again, like to the extent that they have the resources and want to help in these types of scenarios, it's one of the few ways that you really can.
Thank you. That was a really great explanation. I might just add a couple of other points to that. So, one carbon credit is actually equal to 1 ton of carbon dioxide removed. So it's quantifiable. And with Likvidi, we are listing only nature-based credits. So the carbon credits that we're selling come from forests where projects have avoided deforestation, or they're in some way improving the regeneration of habitat and local communities and livelihoods there.
It sounds, hugely interesting to a generation now that is focused on that or should be focused on that, because I've seen previously in other sort of websites and offsetting things, you can plant trees and some of them even have calculators where you can go in and calculate your aeroplane journey, and it'll give you various options. I guess the issue there is a form of transparency in a sense. You haven't got a particularly clear view of what's happening on the other side. And I suppose that's where not only carbon credits are interesting, but also blockchain is interesting, because you can potentially create that element of transparency. As I recall, there's a sort of tiered carbon credit market. There's a sort of forced carbon credit market where the big enterprises like have to buy them. I remember seeing some early crypto projects that were trying to kind of find their way into that world. And then there's the more voluntary one. I also came across something not so long ago called KlimaDAO that was in the process of buying as many carbon credits as it could get its hands on. It seemed to have some sort of fairly funky DeFi engineering in there, but certainly the intent was interesting. I don't know if you've come across that project and whether this is in the same area from a carbon credit perspective as they were working in, or is this is a completely new type of carbon credit?
Well, they certainly were one of the first to market, and they created a huge awareness in the crypto space for this particular market, which is good for us. I mean, I think we have got we've sort of refined our offer. So I would say, there are differences. One of the major differences is we are not going to be selling any credits that are older than 5-6 years old. So I know there are some credits that are older than that are on the market, but there are certain sort of standards that we want to adhere to, and that's one of them. We're also only listing credits for the time being that are verified by Verra, which is one of the two main verification bodies for the voluntary carbon markets, which is where we're operating. As you said, there's a compulsory carbon credit market, which is more issued by governments, but we're in the voluntary carbon market. So there are differences. We are definitely treading more carefully, and we really do want to establish ourselves as a high quality project in the space.
And I take it that, just thinking around the marketplace, that if it is a marketplace that you're creating, you on the one side you have nature that's being quantified in some ways to produce carbon credits. So you need to onboard more nature reserves, I guess, is one side of the market, and the second side of the market is bringing people in who want to offset their energy. Those are the two people you're bringing together. Is that right?
That's right. That's absolutely right. So, like I say, we've got this new retail audience, and in the crypto space that we're appealing to. But for the time being, we have verified credits, but we have just taken a strategic partnership with a satellite and AI technology company called Albo Climate, and we are looking to verify our own credits in the future. And that for us is really exciting. So we'll actually be involved then in bringing projects to market and bringing them to market quicker, sometimes up to 2 years quicker than the existing verification methods. So we're really excited about, that where that will take the market and sort of get to this limiting climate change quicker than is currently possible.
It feels when you open up the news and you see the scientists basically telling you what's coming up, there is a general sense of just not being able to do a whole lot, and other than potentially, take to the streets and sort of, show your anger. And so I guess the idea here is that you're enabling people to make a choice to have some effect. And it can, I suppose, feel at times that you're dropping money into a big black hole that's just getting ever bigger, no matter how much you drop into it. But potentially with this system, you can see the effect on the other side. Am I guessing that in relation to the forestry that's there, can you kind of have a feedback loop to the people that give in relation to that having a form of effect in the world?
Yes, absolutely. So one of the things we are creating is the carbon-backed NFTs, and this is really where the good work becomes visible, because as with the NFT, you can put data into metadata into the token. So you're then able to see which project you're helping with your NFT purchase, how many credits you're purchasing from them. And here's where we've created the NFTs to display the animals that actually are living within those habitats that are, within the projects that are the forestry projects, and the animals that within those habitats that are often endangered or critically endangered. So the artwork is bearing those animals that you are sort of directly helping to thrive and regenerating their habitat. So we quite like that sort of feedback loop we've created there. But we haven't talked a lot about the NFTs yet, so I've jumped forward a little bit. But we do have 3 locations that we are supporting.
That's great. Perhaps Adam, if you give us some insight into how your business is helping Freya to help bring this to the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started 330 AI earlier this year after incubating the project for the second half of last year. And the goal here really was to take kind of all of the most interesting technologies and sort of the Cambrian explosion that's happening right now in AI enhanced creativity and bring it both to individuals and companies to use as a kind of amplifier or a multiplier for human creativity. And so the project that we're working on with Freya, Freya is a client actually. And the project that we're working on with her, basically, we're taking, the environments that are created or the environments that exist within the various places where these projects are located, and then we're creating unique one-of-one pieces of artwork for each single NFT that goes out in a way that allows most of the revenue from the project to still flow back to the actual projects, right? So it allows the artwork not to take up such a large portion of sort of the revenue as it typically would in many of these cases, while still giving every single person a completely unique one of one. And the way that we build these, actually, getting a little bit more technical for a second, is actually we use about 4 or 5 different AI enhancement technologies within it. And so we start by creating these backgrounds using a variety of different types of engines and using words, right? So we create descriptions of these forests and we create stylistic sort of elements within them. And then we work with Freya in order to kind of figure out which are the sort of correct types of look that she wants. And then going from there, we go into kind of a production mode where we can create unique variations of each one, where, again, they have similar sort of stylistic characteristics, but where everyone really is unique. And then you can take that, and then we take the artwork that Freya has provided, that Likvidi has provided, in terms of different animals that they want to feature, different rarity traits, etc. And then we combine those together with these backgrounds, and then we process them again using a different set of technologies that allows the sort of animal avatar on each piece, again, to take on unique characteristics from the environment in which it finds itself, which we think is very apropos of the overall project here. So that's kind of it. Again, the cool part about this is that the process takes a very short amount of time, right? There's almost all of the work is in the actual preparation, is in the sort of curation and sort of determining the different stylistic characteristics and rarity traits and stuff like that. And then once we've got that dialed in, then we can produce these with very small amounts of power and very small amounts of money. And it's, again, it kind of opens up the doors for all of these different types of projects where typically you would need to make a choice between much of the money going to the art, or on the other side, which then means it can't go back to sort of the actual projects that they're trying to support here, or you have to make compromises on the artwork itself such that you have a lot of repetition within it. And even something, again, like something like creating a 10K series where you have, various parts and kind of the Bored Ape style, that's a huge undertaking as an artistic project. And so, again, like, people get paid rightly a very large amount of money for that. But especially in projects like this, it's not always the kind of best balance if what you're trying to do is funnel money back into things that the NFT purchasers find to be meaningful. So that's it. Again, I'm excited about this project because every time we work on one of these projects, I get the opportunity to develop the technology and to kind of take it and make it more useful to people who really kind of need it. And that's kind of the interesting part to me, is that when I first got into cryptocurrency, like, the way that you talked about this stuff is completely different from the way that you talked about it after we had started to build community of people who were non-technical, right? And that's kind of what I see here today, is that AI artwork right now is an area that's just starting to popularize, and it's just starting to popularize because people don't even understand that it is possible yet, but it is possible, and it's something that has already changed our world in a fundamental way. But people don't understand that yet because information about these new technologies is very unevenly distributed, right? So my goal with this, as it was with Let's Talk Bitcoin back in the early days, is to alert people to, hey, this thing happened, this changes stuff. Let's actually think out what the implications of that are. And in this particular circumstance, the way that I wanted to do that was by kind of putting artwork in front of people so that they could see, and then bringing them back potentially, should they want to participate, into these collaborative co-creation experiences, actually. Where you can actually create using AI artwork, but you don't have to become an expert with it. You can effectively, like I said, co-create, in collaboration with an artist or with an influencer or with a brand or something like that. And so that's kind of, that's the next step of this project, I think. This one is more of a traditional NFT drop, but the potential really is quite endless here, and I'm super excited about it.
It sounds like you found a really good functional use case for, a generative art project. Because, as you say, yes, you don't want to putting all of your resources into creating unique one-of-ones drawn as one-of-ones, because the resource intensity is so high and the expense. And really the idea is to make as much profit for as little money as possible, so that you can then funnel that back into the right direction for the cause that you're building. In the last few months, we've been seeing lots of videos coming out featuring DALL-E 2 AI, which is just absolutely phenomenal, seeing what a computer can generate just based on some word input. How is your AI going to work, and is it using algorithms like that in that kind of way? How does the collaboration with the community kind of happen?
Yeah. So DALL-E 2 is probably the highest fidelity algorithm that's out there right now, but it's actually not available to the vast majority of people. This is typical of the company that's released. It's a company called OpenAI. They've really been sort of progenitors of this renaissance moment, right? This Cambrian explosion of sort of these technologies. So DALL-E 2 is probably the best well-known right now because people have been kind of passing those around, but there's probably about 40 or 50 technologies that are out there, the vast majority of them in the open source. So really what I've done is I've created a system that allows us to take all of those different technologies, and to the extent that they actually do something that's interesting or useful, because they're all different, right? Some of them are really good at creating lots of small images fast that are, very coherent. Others are really great at artistic techniques, or like taking an image of like all of us talking here today, and then turning it so that it keeps all of the fundamentals, but it freezes it as a sculpture made of carbonite, right? And so you can do stuff like that again using these, and they're all different. So that's and it's happening so fast. That's the other thing. Again, where DALL-E 2 is today, if you looked back at where we were when I started this project just 10 months ago, like we were looking at stuff that was 5%, 3% as good as what we're seeing today. I can show you some of the stuff. I appreciate the podcast listeners won't be able to see, but it's really, I find it to be fascinating looking back at the stuff that I was like, oh my God, this is good enough that we should start a project. We should build this thing, right? And it's so terrible compared to what we're looking at today out of these different sort of techniques. So that's the really exciting part for me, is that we're in this environment where there's all this low-hanging fruit. And again, like what we're talking about in the context of the Likvidi project is in helping to make sure that the vast majority of the money that comes in from these projects winds up going back to the areas that we're trying to help. But that's not the entire use case. There's like my favorite parts about this stuff is actually that, sometimes artists think about this as if it presents a threat to their art. And the reality of it is that it really doesn't. It's kind of like the introduction of Photoshop, right? Before Photoshop, you had all of these designers who would design things by hand, like placing, cut out pieces of paper onto other documents, right? And then taking pictures of them. And that was kind of how you did a lot of these different design techniques. And it was after sort of Photoshop that didn't eliminate the concept of designers. It made it so that designers were empowered to do much more at a higher quality. It empowered a slightly different group of people in some circumstances, but ultimately it was a very positive thing for kind of the entire industry. And it's the same thing here. If you think back sort of to the kind of great artists, years 1600, 1700, 1800, right? The old masters would very often, if they were successful enough, have studios and factories where they would effectively have many apprentices who would create under their name. And effectively what AI does is it brings that same type of dynamic to any artist who wants it at a cost that is very, very reasonable compared to anything else. So again, like people often work on projects where they're like, we're creating an AI artist, and the AI artist is going to decide what's good and it's going to create art. And the whole point is to create this personality around an AI. And I completely disagree with that. I think that these technologies, again, like they may eventually get to that point, but the interesting part is, what do humans do with it? What happens when we connect the dots between humans on one side and AI artwork techniques on the other side, and basically make it so that AI art techniques, and it's really called image synthesis to start, such that is like the equivalent of learning how to use a paintbrush, right? And it's just a different type of tool, right? An artist has many, many tools in sort of their toolkit, and this is another one that just acts as an incredible amplifier for everything else that you can do. So that's kind of the thinking about it. My goal really is to take all of these technologies and then connect the dots between them such that you can use them more easily than you could otherwise. So that non-technical people can use them, so that we can co-create with artists on one side, connecting with their fans on the other side, and then co-creating together in an asynchronous manner. And so again, like the potential is absolutely unlimited around this stuff. Really, just the big question is, how long does it take to get from here to the next 10x inflection point? And my guess is probably about 6 months. The space is moving so fast, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's fascinating because what you're doing is you're using AI to do all the heavy lifting, and so therefore can effectively pass that cost of not doing the heavy lifting on to the thing to which the funds need to go to, because it could be anything, right? I mean, there's a whole range of things that you could put behind the project. In obviously, Freya, in your case, you're using carbon credits and nature as a way of bringing people around a specific use case. I wonder if you guys had thoughts on the fact that when you're reducing the input, as it were, although maybe that's an unfair way of talking about AI, but essentially the barrier to entry is much lower now with these technologies, in the sense that if I am an artist and I have built a repertoire of doing a particular thing, even if it's with Photoshop, there is a barrier to entry there. And here, if this becomes ubiquitous, it's really all about the concept and how you implement that concept with the AI versus actually doing the artistry. I guess it changes a lot of things, and it also means that there's potentially a vast array of artworks that could enter the market. I'm sorry I'm being long-winded, but I'm just kind of working it out as I go. What are your thoughts in terms of lowering that barrier to entry, and what does that mean for curation, and how important curation becomes in the world of effectively instant art? Maybe we could just talk around that viewpoint.
I would say that at the moment, because the technology is still new, and Adam's team is still honing it, there is still quite a bit of legwork in it at this stage. We're not at that stage yet where, as you mentioned with Photoshop, you've got all your preset styles sorted out and you can just click a button and it's suddenly there. There is quite a bit of tweaking and learning involved in this, which is why it's so exciting for us at the moment. And we're really excited to be at that point in our journey where we're sort of on this journey together, I guess. Of sort of looking for these new ways of working, and we're continuously surprised and also delighted at what they're creating for us. But I think the aim there, Adam, is to get to a point where it is less resource intensive, and where it can be this one push button. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
So I think that George, you kind of cut right to the quick of it. With your last comment on curation. I think the curation winds up becoming incredibly important, because in a world of infinite artwork, which is really what these technologies mean, is that there is infinite potential artwork at a much lower kind of barrier to entry than was true before you had these types of technologies. Now, whether that's good or bad, it's worth noting that this already happened, right? Like these technologies, again, like this is an open source ecosystem in much the same way that early cryptocurrency was, right? Pretty much across the board. And it really is only protocols like DALI 2 that are keeping themselves back and held back as sort of closed versions. So there's this, again, like this has already happened. Now, with that said, I think that, we're talking on a podcast right now. Podcasts are an example of a technology that fundamentally lowered the barrier to entry to who is allowed to have a voice, right? Who is allowed to be able to amplify what it is that they think, and who do you need permission from in order to do that, right? And so I think that these technologies, like certainly they change the game, but I think that they are more empowering than they are problematic. And regardless of what I think, it happens no matter what, right? Technology continues. The sort of pace of innovation is such that it doesn't really matter what we individually want. It just matters that we recognize that in reality, this is a thing that is happening and has already effectively happened. So it's a question of how do we nuance that, right? How do we take that reality that this has already happened and put it into a way where it's empowering to people rather than something that's disenfranchising to people? And that's, again, the reason why I got into Bitcoin, the reason why I'm in technology at all, is because I look at the world and I say, okay, one of the big problems that we have is that people have too few choices, and they're corralled into choices that people who have power think they should be, but which in reality are probably not great choices had they an alternative, right? And so when you talk about Bitcoin or talk about those sorts of things, you're talking effectively about an alternative way to track who owns what stuff on the internet. And Bitcoin tracks money, and other things like NFTs track other types of things. But that fundamental ability to track things without having to rely on a third party who you trust and who may in fact betray you at some point, for either intentional reasons or unintentional reasons, like that's really empowering. So even as these things make the world more competitive, that's okay, because it makes things better in kind of the aggregate, and people have the ability to to become involved with these projects. Again, like the first person who I hired to work on this with me actually was a hobbyist who built a Discord bot that I found myself addicted to, where you would type .imagine and then you would type whatever it is that you wanted. It would create over the course of a couple of minutes a small image that was not particularly great, but which we were like, oh yeah, I see the banana in that. I said I create a banana wearing a hat, and it's got some hatness off to the left, and that's the banana color, so it has a very good kind of banana feeling to it, right? That was 10 months ago. And then today, if you do that, you ask DALL-E for that, then you're going to get a banana wearing a hat, right? And it's really going to look like that. And that's all happened in just 10 months around this stuff. So again, like I think that these new technologies create opportunities. And then the other thing that I wanted to note is that the concept of art, as far as the hard physical, reality of it, that's not going to go away. What it's going to do is it's going to become increasingly a luxury item, because it will present a much more rare and much more difficult alternative, just like really anything else, right? Like the ability to do something with your hands in real life, and even the ability to do something digitally, right? Just painting digitally, but to do it yourself. That becomes important as automation comes in, right? The YouTube didn't destroy the ability to make a movie. YouTube just made it so that anybody who wanted to communicate using that, could do so. And I would argue that, companies like YouTube are necessary in kind of the beginning of this stuff to sort of enable these technologies, but that over time they actually become tyrannical, right? And they actually become kind of the problem and then the status quo that you have to break free from. And again, AI technologies, just by nature of the way they're developing, really aren't going to be like that, right? There are going to be companies like ours that help you to use them and that, create NFT series off of them as ways to sort of codify these moments in time where this was the very first time that this particular style was released, right? And that's really what we do with our consumer-facing product, pixelmind.ai. But kind of in a more broad sense, like the potential is incredible and I think very much empowering.
I think that most YouTube creators are probably salivating at the idea of having access to some of this AI to just never have to generate a thumbnail again. I mean, that's the demand for that is going to be absolutely massive.
I've been using it for album art. It's fantastic.
Have you?
Yeah, I did this picture of Jerome Powell, right? I'm a total monetary policy wonk. I had this picture of Jerome Powell where I processed where he was doing congressional testimony, started from an image, and then I cut out just Jerome Powell from it, just the central bank chief. And I processed him with the words through one of our technologies, clown makeup, right? And so it created, it took his image and then it kept it exactly the same, but it put him in clown makeup. And then I stuck it back into the core image. And here's this, again, like, and I'm not an artist, right? Like, I know how to use Photoshop and stuff like that, but I could never have done that myself. And I never would have paid somebody else to do it because who the hell, like what would the point of that be, right? But again, just by messing with the technology for, I think in that case, about 45 minutes, I was able to get to exactly the place that I wanted with it, right? And so again, like I agree, the potential, like album art, not just for this, but like for music also. I think logos are going to be another area where you'll be able to, not really use it to create final logos, but to figure out what you want, right? To figure out as just the end user, this is kind of the thing that I want. And then you take that and you give it to your designer and you say, okay, make a better version of this, right? But you don't have to do that back and forth process, which is really the time consuming part. You can figure it out yourself and then just have the final parts that gets done by somebody who really knows what they're doing. That's better for everybody. I'm sorry, I cut you off. Please continue.
No, I mean that's that's the game changer, isn't it? And therefore the Fiverr artists all have to completely change their model of what the service they're actually offering, and that's more honing of an idea rather than finding an idea in the first place. But the barrier to entry to a 10,000 PFP project came down rapidly over this last year. It was very difficult to build before, and then as soon as you had an off the shelf product, there was thousands of PFP projects, and then you just lose. You get a sea of trash, and then you really have to stand out as a project to bubble up to the top. And I think that you mentioned carbon credits like a Rolex. Then if you put purpose behind your project, such as to generate income for projects that need income that are doing good things, then that really cuts to the heart of bringing purpose to a project and making it stand out.
I mean, what the crypto space has been characterized over the 10 years that I've been watching it very closely is these kind of moments of opportunity, right? And these moments of opportunity, like I would argue that when the Beeple 5000 sold at Christie's for $69 million, that was an enormous beacon moment, right? Where anybody who was like in the traditional art world was like, whoa, like this guy who was not really anybody in the art world has just had one of the most valuable pieces of artwork ever sold at one of the most prestigious, traditional world auction houses in the world. I guess I should look at this again a little bit more seriously, right? And it's the same thing with kind of all of these different projects. I would argue that Bored Ape Yacht Club did the exact same thing, right? It presented kind of a vision of what was possible moving forward, and that vision, by nature of it being so like you don't have to ask anybody's permission in order to do an NFT project. And that's, on the one hand, beautiful, because it means that you can have projects emerge that you never would have heard of because they never would have gotten permission had they had to ask it. And on the other side, you have this, again, explosion of potential there, which makes the space much more difficult to navigate, right? And also you have people who come into the space and their primary focus is on money, and their primary focus, because they see it, because it's been proven that the money is there. And so I think that whenever you're looking at any of these types of things, like, you don't get the good without the bad, right? And what it just means is that as an individual trying to navigate the space, I very much view NFTs as luxury items. And I think that that's not an insult. It's a reality. Again, nobody needs to own any of these things. But again, like, it's the type, but I think that NFTs have kind of become this status symbol, right? And this way to demonstrate conspicuous consumption, that where your purchases say something about you, and that's the way that you convey that aspect of your personality or that aspect of your identity that you want to convey. Again, like people who use CryptoPunks, right, as what's it called, as their avatars on Twitter, and they don't have their name and they have no identity. They're basically saying that I'm either really smart because I got this when nobody else saw the value, or they're saying I'm really rich because I got this after everybody else saw the value, but I have one now, which means I must have paid a lot of money for it, right? And so, like, I think that those things are fine. I would rather that, conspicuous consumption get funneled into things that talk about people's identity and then enable these new sorts of ecosystems of value to sort of come into view. There's certainly a lot of speculation in the space, and I honestly am not a huge fan of that. I think that, again, like, we've entered a period of time quite some time ago at this point where, like, the reason why you buy things is because you think other people are going to buy them, and that, again, is just kind of a natural part of the cycle. It means that we've been successful enough that people are predicting that these things are going to be worth more money in the future, and typically that's not a good reason to do this stuff. Because it is true until it isn't, right? But again, when you're talking about projects like the Origins collection, really what, again, you're talking about is a way to try and take some of that speculative fervor, take some of that identity, characteristics in terms of identifying with the projects that you support, and then route those into kind of the good parts of the world. Such that it can actually provide something that's beneficial rather than just, making Justin's son, a 100 billionaire.
We're definitely hoping that we'll have artwork enough to inspire people to take action against climate change. So that's definitely our mission. And NFTs are a very good way to reach this new retail audience for carbon credits. And so, yeah, we think it will be the most rewarding NFT that people will buy this year. On many levels, not just for the excellent artwork from 330 AI, but also, helping climate change through the carbon offsets, which can offset you for a year, and then also helping to regenerate the habitats and help the wildlife in these different habitats. So, yeah.
There's a saying, like, if you want to teach someone something, throw them one tennis ball, not 10, because they'll be able to catch the one. Freya, in your mind, when you're communicating this project, are you going to sort of concentrate more on the AI side of things, like, look how amazing this technology is, or do you communicate more the story about the land itself and the animals? Or do you talk about carbon credits and the interest around that? I know it's all of them, but with a view to the retail space, how do you plan to market it from a sort of story perspective?
That's a really good question. I mean, it is at the nexus of several new things. So, 330 AI was a good fit for us because they are pioneering this new kind of technology in the space. The same as we are also, one of the first carbon-backed NFT collections. So it was kind of fitting that the two go together. So I mean, first and foremost, it's visual. The artwork is when you see it, it's just so striking. And the brief was to create a sweet shop effect, because this is one of the things that the AI algorithms do really well. They create this color palette that you wouldn't necessarily imagine. It's a very brave color palette, and it just is so striking. So obviously the imagery always will come first, and we'll really showcase that. But we do want the message about the carbon credits to come through. I mean, it is a learning point for the crypto community, definitely. I mean, you have huge carbon footprints in crypto where people are long-term Bitcoin users, and I include myself in that. But it's not really something that people talk about yet. But I think it will be on the agenda, and much more sort of visibly in the future. So, we want to be a teaching point there as well. So always visuals first, but the message sort of definitely in there.
Are there tax implications around buying carbon credits?
That is a really good question, and that has not come up before. So I'm afraid I don't have a good answer to that.
I guess it depends on your jurisdiction.
But for the retail user, it's if it's a retail product and you're buying sort of low amounts.
It's 5 o'clock.
I do apologize.
Jolly good, it's 5 o'clock.
For the retail user, if you're buying small amounts, I mean, I wouldn't think that there was, it's a consumer product. But yeah, the question relating to small companies and businesses, I couldn't answer that, I'm afraid.
Okay, no worries. No.
Is this them? Is this what we're looking at?
This is not final artwork. This is our in process, sort of like these are the tests that have been produced most recently, and we've been working on tests for quite some time now. But you can kind of see like these are the types of backgrounds that we're talking about here. We can give you some images of these too if you'd like them.
For those listening, it's really beautiful and super cool, just so that you know.
You can just imagine that.
Yeah. well, like I said, we'll give you some pictures.
Is there user input to guide how their particular creation comes out?
So in this particular circumstance, no. In this particular circumstance, we're just working with Likvidi to generate this first batch. But as I mentioned, we do have what we call a co-creation platform that would allow and that does allow users to come in and to interact with these things themselves directly, and then to effectively guide the AI towards the types of results that they want. So we're pretty excited about that. That's, again, like really the opportunity that I've been so excited about is just connecting the dots between the technologies that are out there that are beautiful and they're abstract. Like you got to be an engineer in order to do something useful with them. And then you got to figure out, how to actually talk to the AI, how to ask it for the things that you want, right? And to connect those dots between both, on the one side, companies like Likvidi, and on the other side, between just individuals who have artistic instincts, but who don't have the art history training, who don't have the, the hundreds of hours of watching YouTube videos, and then also, of course, all of these things, like there's a good bit of technology kind of behind all of this, and that can be quite challenging too. And so again, like my goal with this project, as really with everything else that I've built over the last dozen years, is to make it so that we can take these beautiful possibilities and bring them to people in ways that can be useful to them in their real lives. And I think that, as a future expansion for this project, once we get past the origin set, it's an area we're very interested in exploring.
And when is the origin set coming? When are we going to see that?
It should be released the last day of June, unless anything untoward happens, but that's the plan. And yeah, there will be 1,020 NFTs to begin with. And the credits will be, there'll be different bundles of credits. So we'll have bundles of 5, 10, or 15 credits. So depending on where you live in the world, you can offset your footprint for a year. So for instance, if you're in North America, you would need a 15 credit bundle to offset for 2022 on average. And if you're in Europe, you'd need a 10 credit bundle. So we've designed it to help people offset in an easy fashion.
And are they sort of at sort of set prices, I'm guessing, rather than a sort of auction mechanism or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's set prices, and we will have less of the larger credit bundles. So there will be some rarity built in there.
Awesome. Well, that sounds fantastic. It sounds like a good way for people to offset their credit when they're flying to NFT NYC.
Indeed.
a very timely choice for all those that are going. That's a great point, Luke. A lot of it, as Adam was suggesting, a lot of NFTs are about a form of flexing, and I love the idea that you can flex how environmentally minded you are and prove it at the same time, and actually make a difference with that. So like it's very good to some degree get angry on Twitter about it. It's even better to have something that you can show and be proud of and enjoy, whilst at the same time actually making a difference. So I can imagine, just as a concept, that this has many other series that you could do, which has that similar feedback loop based on it, but expanded out across a whole range of different social impact projects.
Yes, absolutely. And we're focused now on forest-based carbon credits, nature-based carbon credits. I mean, we're already getting very excited about when we will have what's called blue carbon credits, which are ocean-based carbon credits. You can imagine the kind of series that we can do with those. And also I've had a sneak peek of what the AI bot's capable of in terms of videos, short videos, where you can literally watch the AI bot bring images into being. And I'm very excited. And Adam's not allowed to do anything with anybody else before us. So we want to have first dibs on everything new that's happening over there, basically.
We're pretty excited about where it's all going right now. If you're interested in learning more about kind of the technology, or if you have a project that you want to follow Freya on, then you can check us out at 330ai.com or 330.ai. .ai is actually a top-level domain at this point, and so I love that. But yeah, you can check us out there. And then, like I said, we do have a consumer platform that's currently in a closed beta. That's called Pixelmind, and you can check that out at beta.pixelmind.ai. It will be opening up to people who don't have our memberships in the not too distant future. But as it stands right now, if you go over there, then basically you can just sign up to be alerted for when it is actually available. Right now, it's pretty limited access.
Awesome. And Freya, where can we find you?
So you can find us at likvidi.com, likvidi.com. And there's links to our Discord and Telegram in there. So come join us. Come join our community. Be first.
Amazing. Well, I mean, it's been fantastic chatting to you guys. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Luke and George.
Thank you for having us.
So good to chat. Thanks.
Okay, George, time for some gerbils.
Indeed. Well, this one is from Carla McJ. So thank you so much for this one, Carla. Markets were low, FUD was high. Did the music really die? REKT Gerbil was, well, kind of wrecked. You'd say he'd reached the end. In times like this, he had no choice. It was time to phone a friend. Rug Pull Gerbil, well, he was off the list, too busy chilling with whale. Pending Gerbil, no luck. Still stuck, and ICO had since set sail. At last, a voice, the sweetest tone, unicorn gerbil, save the day. Chin up, my friend, go walk outside. The music will soon play.
Oh, well done, Carl. That's fantastic.
Very poetic, and also paints a very good picture.
It does. Excellent use of other gerbils as well.
Yeah, indeed.
What a fitting week to be releasing REKT Gerbil.
I mean, it's been absolutely brutal. It was written in the stars for old REKT Gerbil, dude.
Indeed it was. So, next up, we've got at Beetlejuice NFT. Thank you for this entry. Wrecked, he was wrecked indeed. REKT Gerbil just couldn't believe. After many years planting all these seeds, he was once again down on his knees. "O mighty market, why you do this to me? All the time we spent creating, not a single guarantee? Sweat, blood, and tears, basically all in. There is no future without blockchain, that's what I see. But between tears, REKT Gerbil, remember the good say of a fellow community member. Times will tell who is here to stay, and for those with greed, there is not much space. Some things are about to change, and it's not even close to the end. So keep building, little friend, because this is not about a trend."
Again, very poetic.
Yeah, very good.
We have such a poetic community, don't we?
We do. And I like, there's a good concentration on those who are here for the right reasons and will prosper. Very good. Okay, so we have our lovely guests reading out the next two entries. Take it away.
Okay, so this entry is from @theflaz on Twitter, and it goes like this. "A gerbil went all in on Luna. He thought it would go to the mooner. When he rose from his bed, he found out instead that it crashed and he lost a fortuna. His sister has done more appraisals. She traded it all into stables, but the coin UST had done so terribly, she can only afford to eat bagels."
Oh, that's awesome.
That is brilliant.
Thanks to Flaz.
The Flaz one is not.
Sorry, I don't know if I was supposed
No,
to.
that was brilliant. That was so good.
Is this the winner? Was the Flaz just the runner-up, Luke?
The Flaz was the runner-up, and this is the winner. And we've taken a classic meme, and it's kind of dark, but it fits with the day.
Okay, so this one comes from @AlanFalcon on Twitter, and it reads, "Poor old REKT Gerbil just wanted to be a musician and knew if he could just make enough to quit his job, he'd be a star. So he put all his earnings into safe, solid investments for years, but he wasn't getting rich. Finally, he did enough research to feel good reinvesting it all into a surefire blue-chip NFT mint. He slaved his way into the Moon Jerd Country Club Dutch auction whitelist, bought all the dollar gerb coins he thought he'd need, and had his gas at a ready. Mint day came and he won the gas war at great expense, but came away with 2 pre-reveal gerbil crates. The crates turned into piles of straw and their value doubled overnight. He held out for reveal, which finally came at the end of an epic alternative reality game campaign, which he'd had to quit his job to participate in. His gerbils both revealed themselves to be super rare. Offers came pouring in, more than enough to realize his dream. He got a direct message offering twice what everyone else was offering. He went to that trading site that was suggested, and with visions of guitar solos and sold-out stadiums flashing in his eyes, he accepted the life-changing offer. And we all know what happened next. And that's the story of the sad, slow-moving, tattooed gerbil with the lifeless eyes who took your fast food order this morning." That is darker, but the image is still nice. I like the tattoos.
Brilliant. Well, congratulations, Alan Falcon.
Alan, as ever, comes out with a lovely one. Exactly. Well done, Alan.
Brilliant. Well, thanks, guys.
Thank you. A lot of fun.
So it's been a little while since we've released a gerbil, and that is because we've been waiting for our new contract to be ready. First of all, we were looking for where to put the new gerbil home, and we've decided to stick with Ethereum in the end. So yes, we are just finishing off our contract now, and it is almost ready. It's going to be a couple more weeks, and the delay is that we are, making it as robust as possible with metadata that won't disappear. So these are the important things. So we need to be able to have IPFS or Arweave. So yeah, that's the hold up, but we will be sending these gerbils out as soon as we possibly can, and we will let you all know. So yeah, great. Thanks, George.
No problem. It was good fun.
Yeah, indeed. And next time we are starting the first of our security podcasts that we're going to be covering security in space and making that a little bit of a theme.
Super important.
See you next time.
Cheers, mate. Bye.